is space something you were interested in from your childhood or at a later stage? Like how and when did you start loving space?
I would say I was always fascinated by airplanes since my childhood. And when I was 5 years old, I saw the Apollo 11 lunar landing on TV. And at that time, I started to long for space flight. But at the time, there were only Americans and the Russians who were flying in space, and there were no Japanese astronauts. And you know, growing up in Japan, becoming an astronaut seemed to be an undesirable, unreachable, I would say, unreachable goal. And but it was always my passion to fly in space since then.
Okay, Koichi Wakata, it's such an honor to have you here with us. You're an astronaut from the Japanese space agency JAXA. You served as Vice President, Director General of Human Spaceflight Technology until April 2020. You started your academic studies with a BS in Aeronautical Engineering, then you moved on to a Master's in Applied Mechanics and a PhD in Aerospace Engineering, all from Kyushu University. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. I had the privilege to meet you in January while escorting you in Israel during the Ramon International Space Conference. I hope you enjoyed your stay here in Israel.
Yes, I truly did. Thanks for the great hospitality. It was my first time to visit your beautiful country, and it was great to participate in the Ramon Science Week, and I truly enjoyed the trip.
I'm really happy. I asked you back then, one of the days when we were in the car, I asked you if you would be willing to interview for this podcast, and I'm very happy that we managed to do this together.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. It's my honor to talk with you on this program.
Thank you. So how did your space career start?
So I always wanted to fly in space, but it seemed like a very difficult thing to be selected as an astronaut. And since I was always interested in airplanes, I wanted to become a pilot or engineer, and I studied aeronautical engineering in the university. And then after completing my master's degree in applied mechanics and aeronautical engineering, I joined the Japan Airlines as a structural engineer. And at the time, I saw an article on the Japanese newspaper that the Japanese Space Agency was selecting astronaut candidates, and I recalled my impression about Apollo 11's landing on the moon. That was when I was 5 years old. And I really felt motivated to apply, take this challenge. And after a 9-month process of the selection by the Japanese Space Agency, I was very lucky to be selected as an astronaut candidate, and I was sent over to Houston at NASA Johnson Space Center and went through the training with my colleague astronaut candidates, 19 Americans, 2 Europeans, and 2 Canadians.
And that was when?
That was in 1992. That was the NASA astronaut class of 1992. We had a total of 24 people in the class.
And then your first flight to space was in 1996 on the space shuttle STS-72. How was this inaugural flight for you?
My first flight was on board the space shuttle Endeavour. Of course, it was an exciting moment. Whatever you do for the first time, it's really exciting, and it was a moment of my dream come true. And during the flight, I had a chance to operate the space shuttle's remote manipulator system, robotic arm, to capture and retrieve 2 satellites from space. One satellite was from Japan, and one satellite was a NASA satellite. And also, we tested the new tools and techniques for spacewalk that we needed for the assembly and operation of the International Space Station. So it was a very busy week, a 9-day mission, but I truly enjoyed my first flight on the space shuttle.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing experience.
It was truly.
An American shuttle with a Japanese astronaut and a Canadian robotic arm, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it was truly international collaboration. Of course, I had to work with both the mission control in Houston and the mission control in Sagamihara in Japan. That's just a little south of Tokyo. And it was a true teamwork that made possible the retrieval mission of the satellites.
It's amazing, these cooperations in space. They seem so easy when it's up there, so hard down here on Earth.
Well, yes, I was lucky to be able to work with so many dedicated and highly motivated people in the human space program. So I am just thankful to the international cooperation or collaboration in this field.
And then 4 years later, in 2000 actually, you flew your second flight aboard the shuttle with, that was STS-92.
Yes.
I guess that during the training for that flight, you met Ilan Ramon?
Yes. I had a privilege to meet with Ilan and worked with him in the NASA astronaut office when Ilan was preparing or training for his space flight on the space shuttle. And that was right after my second space flight on the space shuttle Discovery. And yeah, I remember he had a great sense of humor, and he was always calm and a very caring person to his crewmates and his co-workers. So I was very lucky to meet him. And one thing that I strongly remember is when we went to outdoor leadership training program, like a team building training together. It was for 10 days out in the mountains of Wyoming in the United States. And so during that training, we learned the what is called expeditionary skills. This is in order to serve as an effective leader as well as effective follower to contribute to the team performance. And so during the outdoor wilderness training, Ilan was always very strong, and he could keep going and climbing the mountains by having only some cup of coffee for hours and hours, and we still were full of humor. So he was an amazing guy, and I truly enjoyed the training.
Wow, it's great that you had the opportunity to meet him.
Yes.
In 2008, you flew aboard the space shuttle to the ISS, the International Space Station, where you participated in Expedition 18, 19, 20, and was actually the first JAXA astronaut there, right?
Yes, that's right.
And how was the ISS experience compared to the previous shuttle flights? I mean, shuttle flights, astronauts go up for 2 weeks, around 2 weeks, and then come back. ISS, usually you spend more time. It's a bigger place. How are these experiences different?
Yeah, you're right. My first and second flights were on the space shuttle. And of course, those are very spectacular flights and great experience for me. But those flights went so quickly. We needed to accomplish so many tasks in a very limited duration. So compared to that, on the long duration flight on the International Space Station, I was able to feel that I was really living in space, living in a home away from home, I would say, for many months. And we were able to conduct a variety of scientific experiments during the long duration space flight. And also, not only, the work itself, but on weekends we can relax and we can enjoy the beautiful views of the home planet. So, in addition to the very challenging work and experiments, we were able to relax a little bit, and that was different from short space shuttle missions.
How long was that experience, the expedition?
Yeah, expedition 18, 19, and 20. I was there for about 4.5 months, and that was my third flight. And the fourth flight was a little longer than 6 months. So of course, compared to the short flights on the space shuttle, staying in zero gravity for many months are tough. But we were able to accomplish a lot of experiments. So I would say it's very efficient. If we stay in orbit for many months, you get used to that microgravity environment pretty quickly. And after that, you are able to conduct in a very efficient manner on experiments and maintenance tasks. So I think staying in orbit for months are very efficient in terms of work efficiency, that you need to conduct a variety of tasks in microgravity. And but isolating, from my family and friends for many months are tough. But we were able to talk with them on the IP phone, and also we had a TV chat with my family members on weekends. So those are very good morale boosters for me.
And I understand that you had some interesting experiments there. Some of them, I understand, were suggested by the public. Can you share some of these experiments that you did up there?
Yeah, that's great that you mentioned that. And that was, I think, during my long duration flight for 4.5 months in 2009. At JAXA, we had a program called Try-Zero-G. I participated in the experiments, and those experiments were proposed by the general public, including the youngsters. And actually, pretty much all of them are very exciting and interesting, but what I recall is some of the interesting experiments are like, what's going to happen if you do arm wrestling in zero gravity? It's kind of difficult unless you have your both feet on the ground in a stable manner. You cannot really do arm wrestling. My Canadian colleague Bob Thursky and I did this arm wrestling in zero gravity, and both of us were flipping around, so we could not win or lose in arm wrestling because both sides are rotating. And also another interesting experiment that was proposed by the public was what happens if you do a high five in zero gravity? It was very difficult. And also another experiment was to fly on a flying carpet like a magician in space. So those are very interesting and fascinating experiments, and I'm glad that people came up with those very interesting experiments that have never done in the past. And I hope that I will have an opportunity to do more of those exciting experiments proposed by the public.
Yeah, a lot of Newton laws in those experiences, in those experiments.
Yeah, exactly. So you can really feel it and you can really see it because we broadcast them on YouTube and other means from the Japanese Space Agency. So I think these experiments made spaceflight more interesting to more people, and I hope they will come up with more and more new experiment proposals.
Very interesting. And NASA does have a way to connect all of their doing with the public. So it's nice that they open this to the public and let the public choose the experiments. Very interesting. Yeah, I know that by the way, even in Ilan Ramon's flight, some of the experiments he did were experiments that were chosen by high school kids in Israel. So
that's right.
It's nice that they do that. In 2013, you launched on a Soyuz rocket to the ISS for Expedition 3839, where in Expedition 39 you became the first Japanese commander of the International Space Station. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what are the main differences between a flight engineer and being actually the ISS commander?
Okay, that's an interesting question, and in space, on the ground as well, each and every member of the crew has an essential role in the team. And as ISS commander for the Expedition 39 in 2014, to the best of my abilities, I made sure that the safety of all my crewmates, as well as the health and the well-being of my crewmates during the training, and also in space. So, the fact that I wanted to make sure that these safety and well-beings are maintained is something that is very different from my experience flying as a crew member, as a flight engineer. And as a commander, I always try to listen to my crewmates very carefully, and in order to fully grasp their needs, and I made clear about what we need to accomplish as a team, and try to have everyone enjoy their time together in space, and not only in space, but during the training also. So those are, I think, a difference in my mind, serving as a commander. And yeah, and for example, like in order to maintain morale in space, it's food plays an important role, actually. So when I was a commander, even before the flight, I try to make sure that the preference food items for each crew member will be launched in a timely manner, before we even launch to the space station. Because those the food that you like is very important to keep a morale high, especially in this isolated environment in the space station for 6 months or something. So I made sure that those things will be launched. The food will be launched in advance before we get there for the psychological support. So by paying attention to those details as a commander, and I was able to have good communication with all of my crewmates on the ground as well as in space, and I was just lucky to be able to work with so many motivated and talented crew members with me on my flight.
What's, by the way, the next thing after food that's important to the astronauts?
For morale boost, I think it depends on the individuals, and some people like to read, and some people like to have TV and phone conversation with their family members, and some people like to watch movies. So it depends, and for me and some of my other colleagues, it's very important to have regular exercise time, because physical exercise like aerobics activities and resistive exercise, those are important to maintain your muscles strength as well as maintaining your bone density. But not only physically, but also psychologically, it was very important to have time to exercise in order to keep my morale high. And so I think it depends on the individuals, but there are many things that we can utilize to keep our morale high for the duration as long as 6 months or even longer.
In addition to your space experience, you also served as commander of the 10th NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations, called NEMO. That was a 7-day undersea expedition at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Aquarius Laboratory, located off the coast of Florida. What was the goal of this experiment?
Yeah, that was a great mission. The mission was called the NEMO 10 mission. And during the NEMO 10 mission, we tested the operational scenarios of the exploration on the moon surface, as well as on Mars surface. And examples of the tests are like how we can organize the moon surface exploration by the astronauts, by the crew members, together with a small rover. Those rovers are remotely operated either from the ground, from the Earth, or remotely operated from a base on the moon, for example. So we tested those exploration scenarios that we will probably using when we go to Mars or when we go to the moon. So those are the missions, and also we collected data in order to determine the optimum location of, for example, the center of gravity of a spacesuit. When you do exploration on the surface of the moon, you have to wear a spacesuit which has some mass, and then sometimes you have to lie down and get up, and then you may have to use the shovels to dig up your samples and stuff like that. So by doing a lot of activities, potential forms of activities on the surface of the moon, we needed to determine where the center of the gravity of the spacesuit should be. So those are the tests that we did during the NEEMO 10 mission. And we were able to do this kind of experiments or data collection utilizing the simulated condition of the partial gravity using the water in the ocean. And so it was a 7-day mission, but we did I would say spacewalk or ocean walk every day from the Aquarius habitat. And also not only for this scientific and technological data collection, another important purpose of the NEEMO mission is to acquire expeditionary skills among the crew members in preparation for space flight.
So there are similarities, of course, between being underwater and being in space, but what are the differences, or how can you compare these experiences underwater and space?
Of course, in space, there's no air, so the resistance from the water is not what you can expect in space. So the motion of your body in the ocean floor outside of the habitat is different from in space, being in space. But closed environment in the habitat for 7 days. The mission duration of the NEEMO 10 was 7 days, and I really felt that the NEEMO mission was very similar to a short duration space flight on the space shuttle, for example. And this is in terms of like a tempo of the work, interaction, and communication with mission control on the ground. And also in terms of the group dynamics between the crew members, and also between the crew and the mission control team on the ground. Those are very similar, I think, between the NEEMO mission underwater and the actual space flight.
Okay, very interesting. So, and how deep was this? I mean, you guys were in suits walking on the bottom of the ocean. How deep?
Well, the Aquarius, the habitat of the NOAA, that is located about 60 feet, from the surface of the water, and but that's the habitat. Habitat is like the Japanese Kibo Bulge of the International Space Station. It's a closed, cylindrical shaped laboratory research facility. Of course, we slept there and we ate, and but every day we came out of the habitat, with a group of 2 people, like when we do a spacewalk. So 2 people came out from the habitat Aquarius twice a day. Each excursion was about 2 to 3 hours. So actual spacewalk in space station is usually lasting for about 6 hours. So our excursion outside the habitat was a little shorter compared to the actual spacewalk on board the space station. But it's deep enough that you cannot just climb to the surface of the water, because after spending there for overnight, the nitrogen gas in your body is already in a saturated situation. So in a sense, it's as risky as you are in space in terms of emergency. If some emergency happens, we need to make sure that we will be able to decompress our nitrogen in our body system before we surface to the ocean surface. So in terms of a preparation for an emergency, it was really similar to a space flight.
Oh, and this is what's called like an analog habitat, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you're right. So that's why we call it an analog mission to space flight. whether you are underwater or whether you are in an isolated area in the mountains, in terms of psychology, in terms of conditions of the close environment. We utilize a variety of environment on the Earth in order to simulate the space flight environment.
And do you believe that these analog experiences are important for spaceflight?
Yeah, of course, the best training is for space flight is to go to space. However, it's very, difficult to go to space, and we need to utilize whatever environment we can use to simulate, not as a whole, but maybe partially simulatable environment that we can do on the ground. We need to utilize it. So I think underwater facility, for example, is one of the best facilities that we can use as an analog environment for spaceflight.
Okay, very interesting. Now we talked about your experiences in space and underwater, and now I'd like to talk a little bit about JAXA and its space program. Can we talk a little bit about the main focuses of Japan in space? I know that Japan has a huge space program and it does many things: telecommunication satellites and launching and weather satellites and QZSS, right? The GNSS constellation above Japan. What are the main focuses of JAXA?
Okay, so you're right. I think, as you said, the space program in Japan covers a large areas, and I think you know them very well. And but JAXA is an organization to support the national space policy from the technology standpoint. And at JAXA, we are conducting a variety of work to support the national space policy of the government, and that includes the development and operation of launch systems. Right now we have H-2A launch vehicle, and now we're developing a new H-3 vehicle, and the Itzeron rocket is another one that we are currently using to launch satellites. And the second part is the space utilization with satellites, remote sensing, communication, and other purposes. And also, we are at JAXA, we are working on the satellite tracking, as well as the human space activities and utilization of the low Earth orbit. We also conduct space science and research. For example, Hayabusa 2, currently now it's on its way back from asteroid Ryugu, coming back to the Earth in December. And not only in space, but also we are at JAXA, we are conducting research in aeronautical engineering. And then also we are working in the international space exploration beyond the low Earth orbit. And we are also developing technologies to cope with the space debris. And these are the areas that of space activities that we are working at JAXA.
That's almost every area there is.
Exactly. So it's we are covering a variety of fields. So and it's important. What I mentioned earlier are all the important aspects of the space activities as a national space agency to support the space policy of the government. So we have a lot of work to do, and that's why it's really exciting.
And you served as JAXA's Human Spaceflight Technology Director until a few months ago.
Yes.
What does JAXA's Human Spaceflight Technology Directorate do, actually?
Yeah, this, we have several major functions in JAXA's Human Spaceflight Technology Directorate. For example, the first one is the operation and the utilization of the International Space Station and its Japanese experiment module Kibo. And also we operate the HTV spacecraft, which is a logistics supply vehicle to the International Space Station. And we are also developing the new logistics cargo spacecraft called HTVX, which is the new generation of the coronatory spacecraft or HTV spacecraft that completed the 9th mission last month. And then we are also working to support the activities for the gateway around the moon. And those are the activities that we are conducting in Human Spaceflight Technology Directorate at JAXA. And also we have astronauts, engineers, and flight surgeons. Those are the medical doctors supporting the human space flights. As well as the we have Space Mission Safety and Mission Assurance Office that oversees the safety aspect of human space flight. So this is the function, the list of the functions of our directorate.
And if we focus on the ISS, what is Japan's part in the ISS program?
Okay. As I mentioned, that we have a laboratory on the station called the Kibo module, and on board the Kibo module, we can conduct scientific experiments utilizing the microgravity of the International Space Station in the pressurized module, as well as on the external platform that is exposed to the vacuum. Those are the utilization tasks of the Kibo module, and Kibo module on board the space station is the only module on the ISS which has an integrated system of an airlock to take up things to space and also robotic arm. So we have an integrated system of the airlock with the robotic arm. And using the Kibo module, we have deployed more than 250 small satellites using the Japanese robotic arm. And I also mentioned that the cargo supply vehicle HTV, since the maiden flight in 2009, the HTV missions have successfully delivered 50 metric tons of cargo to the International Space Station in those 9 successful missions. And so the HTV cargo supply mission was complete last month, and now we are developing the new cargo spacecraft, the logistics spacecraft called the HTV. This HTVX is has improved the capacity of cargo in terms of mass and volume. And also we're developing this new HTVX spacecraft in such a way that the technology of the whole or the main part of the HTVX can be utilized for future missions, like logistics supply to the gateway around the moon and future low Earth orbit activities. So the mission preparation or development is going well. And variety of outcome have been produced from the Kibo module utilization, and like pharmaceutical or material science, and a variety of scientific results are coming out from the Kibo's utilization. But we are also utilizing the Kibo module as a test bed for the technology that we need for activities on the moon and Mars. Because by having a centrifuge, small centrifuge in the Japanese Kibo module, we can create a simulated gravity level of the moon, for example. That's 1/6 of the gravity of the Earth. And also by changing the rotation of the centrifuge, we can simulate the about 1/3 of the GE, which is Martian gravity. So we can use the ISS Kibo module as a test bed for the technology demonstration for the moon and Mars.
So you talked about ISS and low Earth orbit, and then you talked a little bit about Moon and Mars, which leads me to my next question. What are Japan's plans for Moon and Mars? I saw on the internet a mock of a moon rover that Toyota is planning to build. You talked about Gateway, which is a station that will be in orbit around the moon. What is JAXA planning for us for the next decades around Moon and Mars?
Okay, so for the moon exploration, in terms of robotic exploration, we're now developing a spacecraft called the SLIM, S-L-I-M, that means Smart Lander for investigating the moon. And on this SLIM project, we're aiming to realize two things. One is a small and lightweight spacecraft system, and the other objective is to acquire high precision landing technology on the moon. And this SLIM mission is scheduled for launch in the Japanese fiscal year 2022. And as far as the moon robotic exploration, currently we are working with ISRO of India on a robotic mission to the moon, and that is called the Lunar Polar Exploration Mission. And we are planning to send a rover to the south pole of the moon. This is to investigate the water ice in the polar region of the moon. And as you mentioned, the Gateway and our cooperation with Toyota on the moon, the government of Japan announced that Japan will participate in the International Space Exploration last year. That was in October of last year. And as a result of the Japanese government's decision, JAXA, we are developing technologies and components for the Gateway, such as environmental control and life support system that we can use on the Gateway, as well as batteries and thermal control pump, for example. And those are the Gateway contribution technology development that we're currently working. And also we are working, as you mentioned, about Toyota's cooperation. We are conducting a joint study with Toyota Motors, and that is for pressurized crew rover on the moon for exploration. And as far as our exploration of Mars, at JAXA we are developing a Martian Moon Exploration Mission, MMX. And this MMX spacecraft is to elucidate the origin of the Martian moons and the evolution of Mars by observing and sampling of Martian moons. And MMX is targeted for launch in the Japanese fiscal year 2024. And MMX will conduct a sample return from one of the Martian moons, Phobos. So it's pretty exciting, and together with the efforts of Martian exploration by other countries, I think we can complement each other to find out more about the history and the potentially future of Mars environment.
So sample return is very interesting. I know that there hasn't been a sample return from Mars until now. There is one planned, but now a sample return from Phobos, which I'm guessing you're using your experience with Hayabusa to do those kind of things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, thanks for mentioning that Hayabusa and the Hayabusa 2 experience that we had. Hayabusa was a really exciting mission. It was a successful mission. It was a very challenging mission to return the sample, but it was the first time that we were able to conduct sample return from an asteroid, and Hayabusa 2 now has successful touchdowns on the asteroid Ryugu twice, and then it's on its way returning to the Earth. I think we are scheduled for return on the 6th of December. And so I would say Japan has acquired skills and technology and for sample return from from like a low gravity object, like an asteroid. And we can utilize that experience for the sample return mission on the NMX from Phobos.
So it sounds like a lot of your projects are from the future, although you guys are working on it already or did it already. So the next question is, what future space technologies do you want to see come to life? Because for me, things that you're talking about, like landing on an asteroid, that seems like the future, but you already did it. So what are you guys planning for the future? What would you want to see in the future?
So I would say about my perspective, I would say, of course, as I mentioned, what JAXA is working or has been working. So those are all for future development in space. So personally, I would like to see more affordable launch systems so that more and more people around the world can travel to space. And SpaceX company is leading that effort, I think. And then I'd really like to see many more industry partners will join the effort for more affordable launch system. And I think we can benefit from that effort. You know, anybody on the planet will be able to benefit from that. And another thing that I would like to see is also our commercial industry's participation for sustainability, sustainable growth in space exploration. As we talked about the Moon and Mars missions, and of course we are sending humans to the Moon pretty soon, and you know, we will be exploring the Moon and eventually Mars. And in order to continue and then expand that exploration on the Moon surface in a sustainable manner, technology of what's called the ISRU, that's in situ resource utilization. This technology is very essential so that we can utilize the resources on the surface of the Moon, such as water, ice, and we can use that as fuel for mobility on the Moon surface. For example, our rover will be able to utilize that water, ice as a fuel when we explore on the surface of the Moon. And also the water, ice will eventually be used for the transportation fuel to Mars. So sustainable growth is a key in commercial industries' further participation to make the activities on the Moon and Mars more sustainable. And so this is another aspect that I would like to see in our future for space exploration. And it will become, space exploration will become what space economy. I think it's a business field by having more partners, industry partners involved in this effort.
It's true, and this actually leads to my next question. When you say business partners, you talked about, and I'll talk a little bit about the cooperation between Japan and Israel. You mentioned Hayabusa, and of course on Hayabusa, or I think on the lander that came out of Hayabusa, it was a small chip by an Israeli company called Ramon Space. They used to be called Ramon chips, but they do the computer for different spacecrafts. They have today around 200 satellites and spacecrafts all around the solar system with their chip. So that's one interesting connection. You talked about the airlock in the Kibo module where you send out CubeSats. I think at least 2 Israeli CubeSats were sent from the Kibo module from there. One that was built actually by students, by high school students that you met when you were here in Israel. Right. So one of they launched 3 satellites, 3 CubeSats. One of them I think was launched, if I remember correctly, from the ISS. And it brings me to the third connection, where you talked about sustainability, and I will talk about orbital debris removal. So Astroscale, which is a Japanese space company that's leading today the sector of orbital debris removal, they actually bought an Israeli space company called Effective Space a few months ago, about 6 months ago. And now, of course, this Israeli company is part of Astroscale. Are there any additional interesting fields that you think that Israel and Japanese can cooperate around?
Yeah, you mentioned the space debris removal business. That's a great example that I think I'm expecting more and more industry-to-industry collaboration between our countries, as well as like a government level program for collaboration or cooperation. And also you mentioned about Israel high school students developed the CubeSats deployed from the Kibo module, and I would like to see more cooperation in the field. I understand that the 3U size CubeSat, or small satellite developed by Tel Aviv University, will be deployed from the Japanese Kibo module. And I would like to see more of these activities commercially also available. And also on the Kibo module, a variety of experiments conducted on a daily basis, and many of the experiments are for developing new technology, new medicine, for example, or new materials. And those are done in commercially available, commercial fee-based utilization. And I also understand that the Israel industry is utilizing small satellites as like a small laboratory space in order to conduct pharmaceutical and physics experiment. So I would like to see Israeli industry will also be using the Japanese Kibo module for the experiments utilizing the microgravity. Access to the space station is relatively easy compared to other rocket launch and conducting experiments. And we also can utilize the astronauts when we have some issues to recover from a technological difficulty in the space station. So I would like to see more commercial utilization by Israeli industry on the Japanese module. And as far as the scientific research, I understand that a researcher in Technion, Israel University, Israel Institute of Technology, is now participating in research utilizing JAXA astronomical observation satellite. And so in space science as well, I would like to see more bilateral communication and a collaboration in the research field will further expand. So government level, space agency level, and also industry to industry partnership, there are a variety of areas I think that our countries can communicate more for future collaboration. I would like to see that's coming.
Great, me too. You're now back in space flight training and might flight to space again in one of the future missions. How excited are you, and where would you dream to fly?
Actually, I'm not sure what my future holds. I think you know more than I do. So I don't know about my future, but I am continuing astronaut training to keep current in performing my duty as an astronaut in the future. So I look forward to going back to space, whether it is to the ISS or to the moon or even to Mars, and I am ready. I just need to work hard. It's really exciting to be in the training.
Really exciting. Well, yes, I think being an astronaut is one of the most exciting professions a person can have.
And I had such a wonderful experience of working with Ilan, Ramon when I was in Houston, and then this year in January, I met Ariel, and I had such a wonderful experience talking with the students in Israel, and I hope I have a chance to visit your beautiful country again. And because it was such a short visit this time, about 6 months ago, 7 months ago, but I look forward to visiting you again in the future.
We'll see what Corona has for us, if we're going to have the next conference here or online.
That's
we'll
right.
See.
Yeah, online is great. I'm glad that I'm talking with you online, and this is great. And I was lucky to be given this opportunity to see you and talk with you.
I am the lucky one. I would like to finish by saying, Wakata-san, I'd like to thank you very much from the bottom of my heart. It's not every day that I get to speak to an astronaut, and a Japanese one at that. I hope to see you back in Israel, of course, and I hope that our countries find more ways to cooperate. And last but not least, I hope you get to fly to space many more times. Arigato gozaimasu.
Well, thank you, Al-san, and I look forward to seeing you this time in Japan. And please visit us. And meanwhile, be safe, and let's hope for the best.
I would love to come to Japan. I've been there already back in 1996, and I think it's enough time that I should go back now.
Yes, I look forward to that.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank JAXA, of course, for letting this happen. And I want to thank my team that helps me bring this podcast to life, our soundman, Aviad Man, the Superman, our designer, Itai Leon, Don Corleon, and our proof checker, Bennett and L. He actually checks that that everything I say is actually a fact and not things that I made up. So Bennett and L, he's also cool like Space IL. Thank you guys. And again, thank you very much, Wakata-san, and thank you, JAXA, for letting this happen.
Thank you, Al-san.